Hello there. I am an executive at Fazbear Entertainment, and today I wish to run you through our history of locations and franchises that we've owned over the years. This is meant for new employees and or people who are interested in our history. Without any further ado, let's get into it. Interestingly, Fazbear Entertainment did not start out as Fazbear Entertainment, nor did we hold the copyright for Freddy Fazbear. No, originally we started in 1972 as the Country Brothers Pizza and Arcade, featuring the now-known mediocre melodies, Ned Bear, Orville Elephant, Happy Frog, Pig Patch, and that purple hippo I can never remember the name of. And joining them was the now more infamously known Chica the Chicken, which would go on later to join Freddy Fazbear, along with Bonnie and Foxy the Pirate Fox. However, we'll get into that later. All 6 of these animatronics were originally built by Henry Emily as a part-time job for his brilliance. With outside power packs and hinging jaws, these animatronics were quite easy to maintain, and they were the most popular children's entertainment around the block. However, they were not the first. No, the first was Fredbear's Family Diner, run by a solo investor by the name of William Afton, who was inspired by talking bear shows within the Utah area. However, unlike the Country Brothers, Fredbears did not run on full animatronics. Sure, the top halves were full animatronic, but they could be turned back, put inside the suit for a person to wear them. These were known as spring-lock animatronics, and they could not move on their own. They needed a human in order to move off the stage. However, these were revolutionary for the time, but they were jerky. Where the Country Brothers were smooth and slick, these animatronics jerked about with sudden movements that didn't seem very lifelike. That was until a human got in the suit and started operating them. It was at that point that they truly came to life. For the next 3 years, these two restaurants would have a sort of friendly rivalry between them, with the old versus the new, Ned Bear versus Fredbear, that sort of stuff. Until, in 1975, Fredbear's went bankrupt. And that could have been the end of the story. However, the higher-ups at Country Brothers saw an opportunity. Sure, their animatronics were better than Fredbear. Nobody, for the life of them, could remember their names. Meanwhile, Fredbear had become a town-wide name. So, the Country Brothers ended up buying the Fredbear franchise, and William Afton ended up joining as a higher-up. At the same time, William Emily had gotten a full-time job and became head mechanic of the animatronics. This was when a legacy was born. The higher-ups allowed William to write the script for a new Scooby-Doo-based cartoon show called Fredbear and Friends. The first episode, The Start of a Band, followed Fredbear as he contacted his brother-in-law, Spring Bonnie, to start up a band. And the entirety of the show follows Fredbear and Spring Bonnie's attempts to make a band. By the end, they announced the opening of a new restaurant called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. However, the show continued on as it was quite popular with kids, and it mainly followed Fredbear and one of the other main characters as they went on an adventure of some sort, only to return to the new location. The show, of course, was very good at reintroducing old characters such as Chica the Barnyard Chicken. However, it was also very well known for bringing in new characters such as Freddy Fazbear and Bonnie the Bunny, which were cousins to Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. However, the biggest introduction was Foxy the Pirate Fox, who in episode 3 was found aboard an old sailing ship singing shanties for the crew. The biggest and only criticism of the show was the naming of Spring Bonnie, which, rightfully, confused audiences, for the character had nothing to do with the season of spring. Of course, this was an in-joke to the real-life animatronic being a spring-lock suit. However, audiences did not know this until Country Brothers came out with an open statement in 1978 explaining which. The show ran on for 50 episodes, the first 5 of which was setting up the new location, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. With this new location opening in 1978, the Country Brothers company became the peak of children's entertainment, with Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, Fredbear Family Diner, and Country Brothers Pizza and Arcade They had become unstoppable. These new animatronics were once again made by Henry Emily, with assistance from William Afton, who had at this point become interested in animatronics after his restaurant being bought out. After 4 years of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza being opened, the Country Brothers seemed to be starting to get a bit old. It had been 10 years since the opening of the first location after all, and nobody seems to go into it anymore, everyone preferring the new and improved Fredbears and the shining new beacon for the company, Freddy Fazbear. And so it was time for a company change. Relabeling themselves to the more recognizable Fazbear Entertainment in 1982, the old Country Brothers Pizza and Arcade was shut down for good, as it was deemed unprofitable compared to Fredbear's Family Diner and Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. However, they didn't expect what hit them next. It was a prank taken too far. Two of William Afton's kids were in the restaurant at the time. His youngest, Evan, and his oldest, Michael. Michael and a couple of his friends thought it'd be funny to stick Evan's head inside of Fredbear's mouth, as Evan was reportedly terrified of the animatronics. So, up Evan went, and it happened. One of the employees was quoted saying, "As soon as the poor kid's head went into his mouth, Fred chomped down without hesitation." And well, he wasn't wrong. 911 was immediately called, with Mr. Afton being the second. Evan was immediately rushed to hospital, with Michael accompanying him in the ambulance. And William, immediately, even though he was in the middle of working on another animatronic, left his duty to go tend to his kid. Michael said his goodbyes, and Mr. Afton was reported in giving a very odd promise. He promised to put his kid back together again, whatever that meant. An investigation was immediately held, for the question on everybody's mind was, why the hell did a kid's entertainment animatronic have enough bite power to get through an 8-year-old's skull? And the short answer was, it didn't. The spring lock mechanisms, however, did. For a more technical answer, Fredbear was the final spring lock animatronic being used on the public stage, with every other animatronic either being fully built as an animatronic, or being rebuilt to have more fluid functionality and leg movements. Meanwhile, Fredbear had not changed in the decades that he had been used. Sure, maybe the outer coating had changed to make him look less fat, but the inner mechanisms were all still the same, and Fredbear's spring lock mechanisms had his jaw shut. This was always a pain for the animatronic crew, as they always had to unwind the jaw spring locks in order for Fredbear to properly perform, and they were always worried their hands would get cut off by the spring locks. Well, it was no longer their hands they were worrying about. Unfortunately for Evan's father, Mr. Afton, the animatronic that he was working on at the time of the incident, the one that he'd stopped working on to go check on Evan in the hospital, was Fredbear's replacement, as you can see in the background of this image. Would this incident have not happened had Fredbear been replaced sooner? Probably. Would it have saved Fazbear's PR reputation after this? Most likely not, as we are about to dive into. The coverage of the bite of '83 was so widespread that even people outside of Utah knew what happened. And after the spring lock failure became public, people's questions went from how Fredbear had done it, to why kids were so close to these animatronics to begin with. And with the restaurant initially being closed by Mr. Afton for the investigation, it remained closed as public reviews turned sour. This incident, however, didn't have the repercussions for Fazbear Entertainment that you think it would. for Freddy and the gang still had quite the audience and a grasp on children's entertainment. However, the newly rebranded Golden Freddy, which was meant to be a replacement for Fredbear at the other location, was rightfully ignored, and most times purposefully avoided by parents, as its golden coloring reminded them too much of the Fredbear in the photos. And so, Golden Freddy was removed from its stage, and was instead replaced by Foxy the Pirate Fox as a solo act, whilst Bonnie, Chica, and Freddy Fazbear all remained on the main stage as a performance act. As for the Golden Freddy animatronic, its endoskeleton was removed for later purpose, and its suit was placed in the back rooms until they could find a use for it. Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica continued to be popular into the 80s until it happened. The missing children's incident of 1985 really struck a blow for Freddy and his friends. During the month of August, the animatronics went in one by one to parts and service for general maintenance. However, at the same rate, kids were disappearing from the arcade floor. Security cameras checked after the fourth and fifth kid went missing showed the old yellow spring Bonnie suit luring kids into the back room, to not be seen again. However, when police later investigated this back room, nothing was found. The animatronics went back up on their stage, however they started smelling quite awful afterwards, and Fazbear Entertainment just assumed that this was the animatronics not being cleaned in 10 years. Of course, at this point, with them just being checked, and already back on their endoskeletons and on the stage, it'd be too much of a hassle to clean them right that second. So, they continued performing, but as parents read on about the missing children's incident, they became more and more hesitant to take their kids there for birthdays. And eventually, due to the bad PR of this incident, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was forced to close in March of 1986. And that could have been the end of Fazbear Entertainment right then and there. However, interestingly, one William Afton opened an unofficial Freddy Fazbear location named Circus Baby's Pizza World. What made this a Freddy Fazbear location was the inclusion of two new animatronics called Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy, being joined by Circus Baby and Blora. However, this restaurant was quickly forced to shut down on day one due to supposed gas leaks within said restaurant. Well, that's one way to go. Anyway, Fazbear Entertainment, of course, was not willing to give up that easily. And so they asked Henry Emily to make them new animatronics, more sleek animatronics. Animatronics that wouldn't provoke bad memories of the past. And so, opens the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's. Henry wanted to prioritize safety and security within these new animatronics, so he placed a facial recognition system within their cameras and coding to make sure that they could recognize a threat from a mile away. Meanwhile, these animatronics themselves were more plasticky and based upon the toys that Fazbear Entertainment had released previously, with the new addition of Mangle from the TV show, which at this point had been rebranded from Fredbear and Friends to Freddy and Friends on Tour. Also included in the new cast was Balloon Boy and the Puppet. Balloon Boy itself was more of a cash grab, but the security puppet was Henry's idea. The idea was that whilst the other animatronics were on stage entertaining the kids, another animatronic would be keeping an eye on security bands to make sure that everybody in the building was supposed to be there. Normal guests were given blue wristbands, while staff were given orange ones. However, the puppet had a special code which could be activated that only Henry knew about. This code was for a green wristband, which only one existed. And Henry, of course, gave this green wristband to his daughter, Charlotte Emily, or Charlie, as her friends like to call her. This green wristband was prioritized whenever the code was active, and if Charlie was to ever leave the puppet's sight, or somehow get outside the building, The puppet was to activate and retrieve Charlie to bring her back. This code could be deactivated whenever Henry wanted to take Charlie home. As for the old Freddy, Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica, they were placed inside parts and service, and as for the golden Freddy suit, it was also placed in there, just out of sight of the singular security camera that could be seen. Staff, of course, remarks that these animatronics looked quite creepy in their more withered and decayed state, not to mention Bonnie missing his faceplate entirely. And as a result, staff ended up trying to avoid parts and service as much as possible, as not to get creeped out from the older animatronics. However, eventually, when someone entered the room, they'd always find the animatronics moved at least an inch, if not an entire space over, and no one was quite sure who would move these animatronics. However, it got weirder. One day, the old Spring Bonnie animatronic ended up in there, and no one was quite sure who or how it ended up in there, or more importantly, why. It just sat there, so they left it. The footage you just saw was live security footage from both inside the building and from the security puppet's perspective on September 15th. The puppet ended up trapped inside of its gift box after some bullies had put another box on top of it, and Charlie had ended up outside after accidentally going out the fire escape, which had locked right behind her. By the time the puppet got out of its box, Charlotte was gone from the window, and so it went outside in the pouring rain to retrieve her. However, as you saw in the footage, all it was able to retrieve was a body. So it laid down next to her, and that's when the security puppet lost power and the cameras cut. This, however, would not be the worst incident to happen to the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. For the very next day, on the 16th, the security cameras caught the most gruesome sight you will ever see. On the 16th, the security cameras caught the Spring Bonnie animatronic exiting parts and service, holding one of the kitchen knives. It rampaged throughout the restaurant, tearing kids apart and leaving them on the floor. Parents screamed. Kids ran from the ball pit. The animatronics weren't sure what to do. Their programming fried, for it was another animatronic. The security puppet, of course, being a slight bit more advanced, pops into action, chasing this killer around the restaurant. It, however, was easily dispatched due to its flimsy build, and 911 was immediately called. However, by the time police arrived, all that was left was 5 bodies and a disassembled spring Bonnie suit, as someone had fled the scene rapidly. The employees, of course, now knew why the spring Bonnie suit had been placed in parts and service, and the authorities were led to one singular suspect, who happens to be the only person who knew how the spring locks worked. One William Afton was put under trial only a week after the incident had happened, with police showing up at his house with an arrest warrant. However, he could not be convicted, as footage did not show that Mr. Afton was inside the building at all that day, nor did it show the killer getting in and or out of the spring-locked suit. Later, more modern police investigations showed that the footage had indeed been altered, reusing footage from 2 to 3 hours before the spring lock was put on, and 20 minutes after the spring lock was taken off. This, however, was enough, for it masked the identity of whoever had done the murders. However, things were to only get worse. Once the police investigations wrapped up, and William Afton was put on trial, the place reopens to try and get a few more birthday parties in to avoid bankruptcy. The kids, however, started disassembling and reassembling Mangle. It happens so often that the staff just got tired of rebuilding her, and so left her in a mess for the kids to reassemble however they wanted. Also during this time, the pizzeria hired on a new security guard by the name of Jeremy to take over the night shift, as the previous night shift guard had transferred over to day shift after the day shift guard had quit after seeing the whole massacre unfold on the security cameras. But one day, the day shift guard had to call in sick as he caught the flu, and Jeremy had to be moved over to day shift to attend the birthday party that day. And that's when the bite of 87 happened.
Was that the bite of 87?
That was it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. And Freddy Fazbear's closed, with one William Afton disassembling the animatronics himself, as he had been cleared from his trials at that point. Now, you may be wondering how we as a company were able to keep afloat through so much fire. Well, to be honest, it wasn't easy. Many of our shareholders had backed out, and after the first few instances, we weren't able to keep a location open more than 5 years. But we here at Fazbear Entertainment believe in persistence. So, we tried again. And what came out of our persistence is probably the most recognizable Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria that will come to mind when you think of the franchise.
Boys and girls, Fazbear Entertainment would like you to put your hands together for the one, the only, Freddy Fazbear.
Hello, everybody. You ready to have a good time? I know I am. Cause it's Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. For kids, it's #1. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where fantasy meets fun.
Fun not actually guaranteed.
Well, let's meet the band. My name is Freddy, I'm the singer in the band. Got a hat and a big bow tie. Well, I'm a big brown bear, but don't be scared. I'm a real fun-loving guy. Bonnie's my name, I'm hopping along with floppy ears and a cotton tail. My guitar is blazing, this rabbit's hair raising. Just listen to me wail. Take it, Bonnie! Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Get your pizza by the pound. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where all the kids are safe and sound.
Fazbear Entertainment offers absolutely no guarantees regarding guest safety.
Hey, I'm Chica, the lady of the group. My singing is a treat.
So sweet!
But keep an eye on your pizza.
Cause I'm a bird who likes to eat! Nom 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 nom! Finally, there's Foxy. One eye and a hook for a hand. He hangs out over in Pirate's Cove. Now you've met all the members of the band. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The fun just can't be beat. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It's time for us to eat.
For the next hour, add meat to any kid's pizza for just $1.
And if your parents really love you, they'll buy you a 32-ounce Freddy fountain drink.
And don't forget, all the popular kids sign up for our mailing list and get free stuff on their birthday.
Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where fantasy meets fun.
Freddy Fazbear, Freddy Fazbear, Freddy Fazbear Pizza. Freddy Fazbear, Freddy Fazbear, Freddy Fazbear Pizza. Freddy Fazbear, Freddy Fazbear, Freddy Fazbear Pizza.
In a way, reopening the franchise like this was sort of poking at a sleeping bear, pun not intended. For we had to reuse the original endoskeletons from the original animatronics, and they were slapped together with newer parts to make them seem more lifelike, make the children's imagination go wild. But the old endoskeletons mixed with the new parts ended up causing some issues. Sure, some worked out fine, like Bonnie the Bunny, who was probably the most consistent performer throughout the entire franchise history. However, others, like Freddy Fazbear, who had an old mechanical ticker in his chest, sometimes had to be opened up and get the ticker going again. Whilst others, like Foxy the Pirate Fox, completely and utterly failed. However, if you go back into the franchise history, you'll recall that we disassembled Golden Freddy back in 1984 after the Fredbear incident. And so we had a spare endoskeleton just running around. And so, testing begun. This endoskeleton was primarily kept in parts and service and tested with new parts, along with swapping out new parts for old parts to see what worked best. Of course, these repairs were tried out on Foxy once they were approved, but no matter what we did, the poor Fox never got going again. And before anyone asks, yes, we did try WD-40. Anyway, that wasn't the biggest problem though. The biggest problem was Chica. For some random reason, she would always end up with pizza inside of her, and outside of her, and just all over the place. And so most of our maintenance time was spent cleaning Chica up of pizza. We have no clue even today why, or just even how she was able to do that. But putting the mechanical and, quite frankly, odd issues aside, the building itself did quite well, bringing in a small profit, even with the reputation that was now preceding Freddy and his friends. And that advertisement you saw at the beginning? That aired in 1995, and the building lasted until 2001. Trust me, I'm as surprised as you are. Although, if you want an interesting yet weird fact, the back room at the pizzeria was interestingly shut up in 1998, and we found all the animatronics disassembled just outside of it. So, yeah, that was odd. We had to reassemble them. Although the mechanical problem seems to be gone when we had reassembled them, so that was good. That's about it. With the eventual closure of the final Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Because, let's be honest, its reputation and overall income wouldn't keep it open for that much longer, even if we tried. We took a bit of hiatus, and in our absence, a group of fans? Conspiracy theorists? I don't know, just some random people decided to open a place called Fazbear's Fright, which went into the darker side of the franchise's history, and just overall, it was a haunted house. Yeah, we're not sure about that one. But we did allow them to search our old locations for anything they could find interesting. And, well, they didn't really find anything. They ended up having to use fan recreations and old merch from the websites like eBay. Until they actually found something.
We found one. A real one. Gotta go, man. Well, look, it's in there somewhere. I'm sure you'll see it. Okay, I'll leave you with some of this great audio that I found. Talk to you later, man.
So whilst every other location turned out fruitless, when they checked the final 90s location, they actually found the back room, using old blueprints, and they ended up finding not only old audio cassette tapes, but something that, honestly, from looking at it, is quite disturbing. Alright, and now that I'm not sleeping for the next week, yeah, they really found something. We weren't even aware that was in the back room at the time of the finding. Oh god. Moving away from the nightmare, we got into game development. Here we hired a indie developer to make some games to poke some fun at the history of the company and our reputation and all that. And, yeah, not gonna lie, he did a pretty good job making some pretty good horror games. I've played a couple of them myself, and, yeah, not bad. Good job, game developer. On the other hand, we had a brand spanking new location. Again, by an unlikely source, Henry Emily, who'd been out of the company since the 90s rebranding, had actually come out of the woodwork and funded a new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Of course, he had someone else be the manager as he was getting too old for it, but the complete funding was all his. And not gonna lie, I visited there in my early days, and seeing those animatronics in front of me, well, something else. Not to mention their rockstar rebranding, which I quite enjoyed compared to seeing posters of the older stuff. Of course, nothing can be joyous just for the hell of it. For behind these walls were a darker purpose. Or a freeing purpose. I don't know how to put it. I think the best way to show you is these recordings that we're taking on the security.
Played right into our hands. Did you really think that this job just fell out of the sky for you? No. This was a gift for us. You gathered them all together in one place, just like he asked you to. All of those little souls in one place, just for us. A gift. Now we can do what we were created to do and be complete. I will make you proud, Daddy. Watch, listen, and be full.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You are not here to receive a gift, nor have you been called here by the individual you assume, although you have indeed been called. You have all been called here, into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. You don't even realize that you are trapped. Your lust for blood has driven you in endless circles, chasing the cries of children in some unseen chamber, always seeming so near, yet somehow out of reach. But you will never find them. None of you will. This is where your story ends. And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you. Although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. I am remaining as well. I am nearby. This place will not be remembered, and the memory of everything that started this can finally begin to fade away, as the agony of every tragedy should. And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still, and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more, waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, old friend. My daughter, if you can hear me, I knew you would return as well. It's in your nature to protect the innocent. I'm sorry that on that day, the day you were shut out and left to die, no one was there to lift you up into their arms, the way you lifted others into yours. And then, what became of you? I should have known you wouldn't be content to disappear. Not my daughter. I couldn't save you then, so let me save you now. It's time to rest, for you, and for those you have carried in your arms. This ends, for all of us, in communication.
Yeah, I have no clue what happened in that tape. There was a girl talking in the dark, and then Mr. Emily appears to have lost his mind and burnt down the entire building. Which, by the way, there's nothing but a gigantic sinkhole there, and some morons decided to build a pizzaplex on top of it. But we'll get into that in a second. For we have something else to cover, and that is our very own VR game. Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted was our attempt to go into the future with the VR technology. And while overall fanfare was positive. People seemed to really enjoy the recreations of the original games in VR. And for some people, it made it all the more real, and other people also role-played and uploaded videos onto YouTube. Admittedly, this experience was a bit too real for me, and I couldn't get myself past the creep factor on the main menu. Anyway, there were some development bumps along the way. Nothing too serious, thankfully, that I know of. I should probably check the files. But overall, the game got good fanfare, and it paved the way for the brand new Pizzaplex. Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, possibly the biggest location we have ever opened to date. Starring the main man himself, of course, we have Freddy Fazbear, and joining him will be two oldies but goodies, Chica the Chicken and Bonnie the Bunny. Side characters will request of Roxanne Wolf and Montgomery Gator. But don't worry, our good old Pirate Fox hasn't gone quite anywhere, where he can be found in Kids Cove and will be singing shanties to the kids all day. Well, along with that, will come with mini games such as Monty Golf, Bonnie Bowl, Fazzer Blast, and others. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Mega Pizzaplex is built over the recently burnt down Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which is currently giving us some issues, as there's a massive sinkhole that we're having to deal with. However, we hope to have that issue sorted by the time this building's open to the public, and if not, then, well, we'll do what we can. But with that being said, we hope that you'll stick with Fazbear Entertainment as long as possible. Whether you're an employee or a general fan looking into our history, we hope to bring fantasy and fun to life for you and your kids in the near future.